Okay, so it's 2 minutes after 5. I think we can start. Welcome, everyone. So students um, are still arriving into the room, but we can start. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Behruz. I taught 2 sections of 1DA3, but some of you may be my former students. Some of you may be students who took 1DA3 with Yunfei, or maybe our co-instructor, Shamik. Either way, welcome. This webinar is scheduled and planned with the Business Analytics Learning Lab, or for short, we call it the ball. And we are very happy that Dr. Yunfei Ma decided that, agreed to hold this presentation for us. He's, can we say former? In 2 weeks, we can say former PhD graduate at DeGroote School of Business. And he has done great work with data analysis, and we are so proud to host him today, talking about sports analytics. So I had a conversation with Yunfei. He indicated that his presentation will take between 30 and 40 minutes. And then after that, we'll open the floor for questions. Now, Yunfei, what do you prefer? If someone has a question during your presentation, do you want them to hold that until the end, or do you want them to interrupt you and ask the question during your presentation?
I think definitely people can put the question in the chat, and if
Okay.
it's like relevant, I can answer that very quickly. But definitely we can accumulate everything at the end, and I'll definitely
Okay.
answer
Okay.
all the questions if I can. Yeah.
Absolutely. And guys, I encourage you, while Yunfei's talking, to think about things you may want to do more, in the future with the lab. We are open to all ideas. So if something caught your eyes and you decided to do further, analysis on that or learn more about that, we also have access to Yunfei. We can always reach out to him and ask our questions. So just write it down somewhere, and we can always discuss that. And if you can think of, or you happen to think of, any projects that you want to do with the lab in sports analytics, we can definitely look at that too. And feel free to ask Yunfei those questions, right? So he's a great resource that we have access to today. Please don't be shy. Don't hold back on your questions. Just unmute yourself and ask them. So with that, Yunfei, please start. Please take the seat.
Okay.
Thank you. I will mute
Yeah.
myself and.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction, Baruz, and it was a pleasure for me to be here and talk about sports analytics. And just a little reminder that for myself, I am not an expert in sports analytics. I'm just, as probably everybody here, who is interested in sports and who is interested in how data is playing into the sports nowadays. So definitely for those very deep sort of technical things, I will not be the person, sort of can give you a very nice answer, but definitely I'll give you some of my observation and some stories within the community of sports analytics, and definitely give you a foundation of how you can look at this industry different from just, let's say, a sports fan perspective. So let's dive into this presentation. Just give me a second. Okay, so the first part is definitely the definition of sports analytics, right? We heard this term, probably everybody here knows the term from, various contexts, but definitely the definition for sports analytics has changing from, many years ago to now, right? And the definition definitely expand throughout the years. So these are the three definitions I found online, and each of them include different things. So, for example, for the first one, as we can see here, sports analytics began as a way to collect and analyze historical statistic. And in this case, in majority of the case, we just use that to help inform player, coaches, and other stuff to help facilitate this decision making both during and prior to the sports event. So based on this definition, we can see that most of the data are only to help a better performance for the team, right? And as the industry sort of gradually evolve, sports analytics has become like more broader umbrella for different things. So, for example, for the second definition, sports analytics involve analyzing data to gain insights into athletic performance, which makes sense, and also business operation. And we're going to talk about that later because many technology like internet has expanded the distribution of information where sports has become a very large industry around the world and impacting many people. So the third definition, which is much more interesting in my opinion, the sports analytics involve analyzing data to gain insights into athletic performance, business operation, and also social, economic, and cultural implications. So these are very important and trending sort of aspects for sports analytics, not only to look at the business part, the athletic performance part, because now these stars within different sports has so much impact on the lives of so many people, right? There's a trending research direction into not only looking into the data within the sports, but also how these data can help us understand the social, economic, and cultural implications. So why are we doing sports analytics, right? So if we look at from a market perspective, the global sports analytics market was valued at a $4.5 billion in 2023, which is a very large market and is projected to reach $6.21 billion by 2026. And I think this is a very conservative sort of estimate because now we have more technology, for example, artificial intelligence that can drastically accelerate the growth rate. But even with this very conservative estimate, the compound annual growth rate for the market is around 20%, which is a very good market. If you look at some other markets, their growth is almost flat or, just 10%. It's very good, but for sports, it's around 20%, which is a very good market to enter. And also, many cutting edge technologies are first introduced to the world just through sports analytics, no matter what kind of sports you're interested in, right? For example, I'm personally interested in soccer, and there are many technologies that are first introduced to the world and to the audiences through the sports. And the third one is the impact of analytics extend far beyond the monetary value with significant social and economic implication, which we're going to see today with some examples. So sports analytics began, with basic data collection in baseball. So this is from a long time ago where, we don't have these advanced technology to like collect data. But remember this, for all the analytics, the foundation is data collection. So in the old days, people don't have a lot of technology, but they start to just record them on paper. And one of the earliest sports to embrace statistic is baseball. So in 1870, Henry Chadwick, a sports writer, developed a box score and invented metrics like batting average and earned run average. So these are baseball term. I'm not familiar with this term, but basically this is or the origin of some metrics we use to analyze the sports. And these stats quantify the player's performance and laying the groundwork for the analytical thinking in sports. And as you can see here, this is some text from the old days where people sort of collect the data manually and do analytics in sports. And probably a lot of people who watch this movie before, start to get interested in the sports analytics industry is the Moneyball movie. Many people know the industry through this movie, where the manager attempts to assemble a competitive team with half or even a third as much money as his rivals. So we always love the underdog story within the sports, and there's a lot of scientific and statistical thinking within that specific realm where you can have much less resource, much less capture of audience, but you can achieve things that people think it's impossible. So with that, the basis for sports analytics is data collection and big data. So the biggest inflection point in the industry come around 2010, where big data has become a real thing. So data collection has become more in depth and can be conducted with relative ease, right? So before everything has to be done manually, and in 2010, with the concept of big data become into fruition, a lot of technology has been helping the sports analytics industry to grow very rapidly. So, and not only did the sample size for data collection increase, so we don't have to, if you remember from the 1DA3 concept, right? We don't have to look only at the small sample to learn about the population, but now we have access to like a large proportion of the population, which gives much more insights for analyzing sports, and also some novel data sources that hasn't been collected before are now available for more cutting edge analytics. And some technologies, for example, computer vision in soccer, now it's widely used to analyze the players' behavior and even their micro performance and their movements on the court. And also wearables that are sort of recording not only the players' information, but also, let's say, on a soccer ball, right? They collect data from how players kick the ball and how the ball is moving within the court. So now let's get into something that's really interesting, right? So everybody here probably is very interested in sports, but what's the difference between sports analytics and the sports fandom, right? So as this slide says, a lot of people get into sports analytics because they are passionate fans. And maybe you are one of them. So you love a team and you cheer with every goal and you feel such rush to win, and the passion sort of drive you to this field of sports analytics because you want to know like what will happen next. However, the passion is sort of like an entry point, but here's a key difference between sports analytics and being a fan of the sports. So while being a fan is all about your heart and emotion, and sometimes we have such a strong attachment to certain team or certain player, sports analytics is about cold hard numbers where we don't care so much about the feelings. So, and the most amazing part about this industry is that for a professional sports analyst, if you want to gain traction from the community, usually we want to have contrarian view, which means your analysis can draw a conclusion that are very different from the conventional wisdom in the fan base of certain sports, and that's kind of the amazing part about sports analytics. So let's dive into some examples I love, and these are like contrarian views from the data we collect from various sports. And one of my favorite sport is basketball. So I sort of look into these two examples, and we can go through them one by one. And the first question we're gonna talk about is, does height matter in NBA, right? So as a fan, we assume taller players can dominate. If somebody here played basketball before, definitely you can think of Shaq or Yao Ming owning the paint, right? Height helps with rebound, help with block, and there's a lot of advantages to the height. But also, you have smaller player like Steph Curry, which is who is like 6'2", and he's revolutionizing basketball with the shooting and his dribbling and everything the magic he does on the court. So there's a big sort of question about, does height really matter for basketball? And people now are, especially in the current NBA, right? People are cheering for shorter players to dominate NBA with like accurate three pointers and stuff like that. So we have the context. So the question becomes, if you're shorter, how likely can you get into the NBA? Given nowadays, like NBAs tend to promote like shorter players with different kinds of skill set, right? So here's the data for the height in for average American man and also the NBA player. So as you can see on the left, you can see like a normal distribution you see in 1DH3, right? Nothing crazy here, but as you can see, it's a normal distribution, and most, the average height for an American man is around 5'10", right? And on the right, we can see a distribution of the NBA players. So as you can see here, NBA players tend to be much taller than the average American man. and most NBA players are around, let's say, 6'5", 6'6", and 6'7", so in a much taller band than the average American man. So here's where we can just analyze the data, right? We just put the data and overlap them with the columns here. So as we can see here, we have some interesting findings. So around 40% of the people within the average American man population don't even have a chance to get into the NBA based on historic statistic, right? So the shortest person in NBA in the history of the NBA is 5'9", right? So if you're less than, let's say, 5'9" or 5'10", your chance of getting into NBA is very, very low. And also for 60% of the population are competing with around 40% of the NBA spot. So as we can see here, if you're, let's say, more than 5'10" to, let's say, 6'5", right? So you're like a taller guy, but basically you are all these people are competing for only 40% of the NBA spots. And if you're very lucky, if you win the genetic lottery, right, you're taller than 6'5", which means you're less than 1% of the population. So for these people, they are getting more than 50% of the spots within the NBA. So, so how likely are you getting to the NBA purely based on one statistic, one metric, which is height? So let's draw the chart to show it, right? So this is the chart I get online, which is the likelihood of somebody getting to NBA only based on height. So we learned from 1DA3 that we can do data transformation. So as you can see on the y-axis, we have a little log transformation. So it's not like a sort of linear y-axis. But basically, what this chart tells you is that as your height grows, right, your likelihood of getting into NBA becomes larger and larger. So while the current status of NBA tells you that the three-point shooter that are typically on the smaller side are dominating the game for now, the data tells a very different story. So let's quantify that a little bit. So before that, I would sort of recommend you to read this book, Who Makes the NBA, if you're interested. So this book is written by a data scientist from Google, and he's very, good sports analysis. He's doing everything himself. But this book dives into some very contrarian and interesting facts about the current NBA. So let's go back to talk about the heights, right? So basically, what the chart here shows is that each inch roughly doubles your chance of making the NBA, like throughout the height distribution. So that's a huge deal because if you're an average American male that are, like, let's say, 5'10" or shorter, your odds of reaching the NBA is about 1 in 3.8 million. So which means you're almost impossible to get into the NBA. There's a big competition for that because you're competing with a lot of people, right? So, but if, let's say, if you're 7 feet tall and you win the genetic lottery, the data suggests that only 1 in 7 7-footers in the United States make to the NBA. So, which is a very, very high chance, right? 1 in 7, which means if you're in a class of people that are only 7-footers, you don't have to be like the top within that specific class. You just have to be 1 in 7, right? So that tells you that the NBA, while we think it's sort of a lot of metrics play into how people get reach the NBA, but it's amazing that a single metric can predict how likely you can get into the NBA. And if you think about the sports, right, can you think of any other high profile field like NBA where a single trait can give you such an insane odds of reaching the top, right? So and also there's a very interesting fact where for the NBA, the physical sort of characteristic we're looking at for an NBA player, a basketball player, is very similar to those of the volleyballs. So while many people that are very tall and they have big hands and they have all the characteristics that are very similar to the NBA player, they choose to play volleyball, which is a horrible financial decision because they are making like salary like 300K a year. But if you think about the top players within the NBA, right, they are probably billionaires. Some of them can make billions of dollars just by playing in a game. So that's a horrible financial decision. So that's where the interesting part about sports analytics is that you can know these like very interesting fact, and you can talk about financial decision for people. So the interesting part for this case study is that height gives you such a massive edge in basketball, especially for roles like center who dominate rebounds and defense. But as we touched earlier, the game is evolving, but still, height can give you such a big chance of getting to the NBA. And also, if we understand the height impact, the free throw data will become very obvious. So usually we observe that taller players are worse at free throws. If we build like a simple linear regression, and we learn from 1D3 as well, tells us generally the taller players are worse at free throws, especially at clutch moments. So, and the reason for that is simply because there is not a lot of competition. So if let's say you're a 6-0 like me, you have to be very good at everything so that you win the competition and be like a Chris Paul of the this era, right? But let's say if you're Shaq and you're tall and you're strong, you only need to be good at one thing to dominate the league because height gives you such a good advantage, right? So generally, because of the competition, taller player tends to be not very good at free throw because their impact is reflected in other parts of the game. So, and also another discussion we always have in different sports is like sports fans also love to debate who is the best player of all time, right? So the example is probably in soccer, we talk about Ronaldo and Messi, and in basketball, we talk about Jordan and James, right? So, how can sports analytics help us to understand who is a better player or what role does sports analytics play within that specific discussion, right? So we're going to dive into a different example here, which sports analytics not is not helping you to reach the conclusion, but bringing more context to that specific discussion. So here's a very famous sort of question that the sports fan love to talk about in terms of how people can get into NBA. So the question is, does rough brain produce NBA players, right? And the conventional wisdom tells us that suburban kids tend to play for fun, while inner city kids look at basketball as a matter of life or death, right? And the primary example for this is LeBron James, where he has a very tough upbringing and he has reached the top of the NBA. And people start to have these sort of concept on, for these kids who are having a tough upbringing, it's more likely that the kids is going to reach the top of the NBA. But does data show that within this specific claim? Unfortunately, the data shows exactly the opposite. So while poor men are underrepresented in the NBA, so the conventional wisdom we just talked about that inner city kids background very hard, very tough upbringing could be getting into the NBA because of hard work. The data shows that for the kids that are let's say African American, if we control the population kid in one of the wealthiest county in states, are twice as more likely to reach the NBA than the one who is born in the poorest county within the USA. So that's very shocking, right? And it's shocking to me initially because from the story of LeBron James, where you think about okay, for kids who are having tough training, it's they're gonna work hard and they're gonna sort of reach the NBA much likely. But here's another data point, right? So for the second generation NBA player, which means their dad is playing the NBA, they have a 766 times more chance of an average American man to get into the NBA. So if you're, let's say, have a good sort of background in terms of having good training and have a good family, it's much more likely to get into the NBA. So, but I'm still not convinced somehow, right? Because of the success of LeBron James. So, if we look at this study by Freire and Levitt, so this contrarian view is proven by just looking at the sort of the first name distribution of the African American males. So, this study found that the African Americans' social economic status heavily influenced their naming. So kids born into poor, less educated family, single mom, are more likely to get a unique, distinct name. And on the other hand, kids from middle class, educated, married parents are more likely to get common names like Kevin, Chris, and John. And in fact, African American kids from poorer backgrounds were twice likely to have names no other child got from that year. So the next question I ask myself is, can we look into the sort of first names of the NBA player and see the distribution? And does that prove the point where tough upbringing sort of is not an advantage for getting to the NBA? So here's the homework here. So this is a very simple sort of thing we can do to for the analysis. So I will share the slide after the presentation. So, but if you want to try that yourself, I will provide some resources for you. So basically, just to give a little context, for any sports analytics, we start with basically three parts. So you have the data where you can use the first link as I provided to look at the NBA player statistic. And the second part is the tool you want to use. And here I recommend to use a word cloud, which helps you to visualize the frequency of the first name in a fun and engaging way. And the last part is the programming language, Python. So this is a tool you can use, and I've attached a simple tutorial to show how you can do this in Python. So give it a try, and you can probably build a word cloud and to see if the claim is correct or not. So let's sort of after the two example, let's dive a little bit into how can you enter the industry. So this is where I can provide, I think, more value as somebody who is doing a lot with data. So sports analytics is a very interesting industry, and I think now is the best time to be a sports analyst. And here's the reason. So why now is the best time? The reason for that is because massive data are available and open source. If you think about the old days, right, data is often not available. So usually people do analysis just by watching the game a lot and based on their own experience, which sometimes we can be tricked by our own experience because people have biases from the data, right? But now lots of data, massive data are open source and they are available for free online. So there has been unprecedented opportunity for us to access these resources for analytics, right? And the barrier for entry for this industry has massively decreased due to artificial intelligence. So it used to be like you have to have like certain years of training to learn all these tools, right? But for now, as we have artificial intelligence, probably everybody has used ChatGPT before. This technology can help you to gain the skills very, very quickly, and you don't need to have a you don't even need to have to take a course, right? You can just by learning by asking the questions. And also, there's an emerging trend of indies, which means that you can do everything by yourself. In a sort of modern sports analytics, because we have a lot of data, people are doing that in a sort of like a team collaborative way, right? Some people try to collect the data, some people try to clean the data, some people try to build a model, and some people try to visualize that data and communicate that with the audience, right? But nowadays there's a trending sort of role where you can just do that by yourself because everything now is available and things are become much easier to learn nowadays. And another question we have to ask is what skills do we need to enter the industry, right? So we're going to talk about that a little later, but basically you have to have a very basic understanding of Excel, which we taught in business school, right? And at least one programming language that is good for analyzing the data and then manipulate the data, right? And the second part, which I think is very interesting, is to have critical thinking and the ability to discern and articulate contrarian views. So for sports analytics, the most amazing part is that after analyzing the data, if you can reach some contrarian view, which are different from the general sort of public perception on certain things, I think that's the easiest way for you to get traction from the field, right? And the prime example is the book I recommend, The Data Scientist from Google, Seth, and you can look at his website here. But basically, he had a lot of analysis that are very different from our conventional wisdom, which gained him lots of traction in the community. and also the ability to adapt to AI and new technology. And now the technology has been evolving very fast, and even in the field who are very sophisticated in sports analytics are still trying to understand how we can adapt to these new technology. So if you are interested and also you are curious about the new trend in technology, this is definitely a good field for you to spend your time on. And also the last part, which is, also very, very important, and most people ignore that, is writing, communication, and data storytelling, especially the last part. So for some people like me, who is more on the technical side, we always lack the capability of translating data into a story, right? Because especially in the field of sports analytics, the end user for that is basically the sports fan and the audience, right? So if you can sort of tell the story behind the data, that will give you a huge advantage in terms of entering this field and gain the attraction and gain the impact for your work. So let's talk a little bit about, the tech staff. I don't want to go super deep into that, but basically you can pin yourself on these kind of skills, and these are like important things that you can learn as on the technical side to prepare you for some of the topics you want to explore, right? So definitely Excel. And nowadays, people love coding, but definitely Excel it's much more powerful than most people think, especially those people from computer science background, right? Excel can handle like a lot of the things, and it's a very good tool to use and to start with your sports analytics project. And if you want to learn a little bit about programming, definitely Python and R are good, programming language to manipulate data. And especially for Python, it's good for machine learning and deep learning tasks, right? Because there are many libraries within the Python that you can just grab them and use the tool to do certain analysis, build certain models. And for R, it's more like statistical, and you're gonna learn that in business school in your upper year class. But definitely, this one is more for statistical analysis. If you don't want to build like a very complex model, you just want to manipulate the data and see what's going on with the relationship between one data set and the another, and you want to do more statistical analysis, use R. Is a very good choice. And also some people ignore, but basically, now the data set has become so large. Many of these data cannot be manipulated locally. So now, we use a cloud database to host the data in the cloud, which is not in your computer. And a programming language called SQL is basically how you can sort of get the data from the cloud and to do some analysis for parts of the data locally or even on the cloud, right? So that's basically on the database side, which is because of the growth of the scale of the data. And also, how can you start your first project, right? So definitely you can find, data, and I'll give you this data here, which is probably a good starting point, which is the stats from the official NBA website. And for different research objective, right? You're gonna sort of find the right data set for that specific research project. And the second part is data cleaning. It's the boring part, but most people, especially for data scientists, right, in sports analytics, they spend like 80% of the time just to clean the data. It's very tedious and it's not interesting, but it's what you have to do to have good results, right? Especially for sports analytics industry. Unlike other sort of industry, the data is very scattered, meaning you are grabbing data from many, many other sources, and that makes your data cleaning much more complex, right? But just to be patient to do data cleaning, because it's just the nature of the industry. And the third part is definitely data processing. In this case, you want to build models to sort of give you a sense of what's going on within the certain research topic. And in this case, definitely my recommendation for people who are doing research is to start with linear regression, right? Don't start with like a super complex model. I saw people, doing sports analytics going into like very complex deep learning model, right? It doesn't worth it, right? So everything you can start with a very simple model, and even the simple model can give you a lot of information if you're dealing with the right research question and the right sort of data set. And also visualization, right? This is very important because when you have the results from the sports analytics, you have to have a way to communicate that results to other people. So visualization is very important, and especially in this industry, right? Sometimes in more like technology oriented industry, we don't have to have like very beautiful visualization, but definitely in sports analytics, right? Visualization is very important. If you can build good visualization, it can communicate the information much better and much more efficiently to the end users. And also some potential areas you can look into for sports analytics. And the first one is sports betting. So this is a very large industry where, because people love to put bets on different markets, right? For example, soccer, basketball, and everything. There's bets. So there's a lot of money within this industry. So if you want to do analysis on that, this is a very lucrative parts you can look into, right? And also other operational and business application. So this does not only include like doing like specific sports data from the players, but also how you can help a business to run within the sports industry, right? So nowadays, if you think about all the big clubs in basketball and soccer in Europe, these are like huge business, right? These are huge brand. So not only do we need people to do analysis on the players part, but also we need people to run the business, right, in a very efficient way. And this is also a very interesting area because, for example, some of the trend in the NBA can also be explained by the business incentive behind that. For example, now why NBA is promoting short players is because it can reach a much larger audience, right? People will think, oh, that's possible because these short players can play, very can be very successful in NBA. So I could probably be part of that sort of dream, American dream, stuff like that. So, that sort of the business perspective explain how the sports evolve in certain ways, right? And also the social impact is also very important because now these players have much larger impact than before, right? So definitely we want to analyze the social impact, and some of these analysis will have intriguing results that can change our views on the certain sports and what kind of players can get into the top of their game. Also, let's focus a little bit on AI a little bit because it's a trending topic. Everybody's talking about AI. So here's my perspective on AI. So learning will become easier than before. So that's why I said, currently it's the best time to enter the sports analytics industry because the learning sort of period has shrank very much to like none. You can just ask question and you can get the answer very quickly on demand, right? And also using AI for new sources of data generation, but not trust that too much. So, AI can sort of answer a lot of questions and can do a lot of, analysis from the different from the traditional data. For example, you can rank the NBA player based on who loves certain food the best, right? So for these data, it's not even possible to imagine, let's say five years ago, but now you can just ask AI to generate that list for you. But don't trust that too much yet because this industry is still evolving, and sometimes the AI will not give you an accurate answer, right? And the third part is using AI as an agent to help you to replicate the task. So, now people here in the audience probably just getting started with their projects, but basically later stage in your projects, you can use AI to sort of help you accelerate and as an agent to help you do certain job as you are, you know, doing other stuff or as you are sleeping, right? They can just help you collect data, do the analysis for you. And also using AI as a writer to communicate and analyze the results. So not only can AI help you to learn, but also they can polish your writing to better communicate the results from your analysis. Many technical difficulties are basically solved for the sports analytics industry due to AI, and the only scarcity for this industry comes from a creative mind. So the interesting part about this industry is that you can always take a very unique angle to look at the same problem, right? So if you can take a unique angle and bring in new data to a certain context, that will give you an edge in terms of having amazing results in some analytics project. So my prediction is that the legacy sports analyst job will be replaced, where the incumbents will not stay for long, while the innovative minds will thrive and take over in an industry. And I think in sports analytics, it's going to be happening much faster than other industry because it's audience based, and if you have like good results, you will gain traction like very very quickly. So let's talk a little bit about large language model. I just want to give you like two examples of the good part and bad part about large language model and AI, so that when you are trying to do your research, you can sort of have a sense of why it's good and why it's bad, right? So, for example, I'm just asking Grok, which is the large language model from Twitter or X, right? I'm just asking the question. Let's say we're examining the correlation between NBA player, a clutch time performance, and the level of adversity and they face growing up, right? So these are like two totally separate topics, but if you ask the AI in the same query, they can actually rank the players based on their knowledge, right? You can think of a large language model as a compression of all the human knowledge within that specific model, right? So they have the understanding of all the players and they can give you a ranking based on their reasoning, right? However, the bad part is don't trust large language model too much, especially on math problem. So I think I showed this during my lectures in 1DA3, where students are asking whether we can use large language model to do certain things, right? I said don't trust that too much because, for example, you can ask a very simple question to large language model like 9.99 and 9.9, which one is larger? And I think now they fixed that, but basically from let's say 1 month ago, this one is still like a trending sort of joke in the large language model community, where even like simple math problem, which number is large, cannot be answered correctly by the large language model. And also for the field, people are still investigating like what's the boundary condition for large language model for math problems, but definitely don't trust too much in terms of the mathematical reasoning from these AI tools. And just to do a little concluding remarks, and then we'll open it up for questions. So the industry trend, sports analytics is a very sweet industry to combine your passion and skill, right? Contrarian views, very important for an innovative perspective, will bring you a lot of traction within the field. Simple statistic model will work 95% of the time, so don't think too much about the complexity on the technical side. Start with linear regression. AI will totally modify the landscape of the industry, and which is what's happening right now. And the golden age for sports analytics, especially for indies, independent sort of analysts are starting. Basically, you can start your project today to be an indie and do amazing projects. So, and also the difference between passion and data. Sports analytics can be used to challenge conventional wisdom, and the results may conflict with fans' passion and perception, which is good because in that case you can gain a lot of tractions. But this is what makes the industry even more fascinating. So I'll conclude with this quote I write basically myself. So while the debate over who is the GOAT, Michael Jordan or LeBron James, will continue for many years, it's clear that LBJ's unstable upbringing is an outlier compared to the success of his achievement, right? So that's the beauty of sports analytics. It doesn't end debates, but it adds a deeper layer of insights, helping us to better appreciate the exceptional accomplishment of athletes like LeBron James, who succeed against all odds. So thank you very much. That's my you know presentation, and now I'm opening up for any question from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yunfei. I really, really enjoyed listening to you. You have great insight and great sense of humor. So yeah, it was amazing. I would like to open the floor. Guys, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask the questions. Please don't be shy.